Striking the KYC balance, a seamless player journey with anti-fraud vigilance.
So we only had a short time to prepare this, but the conversation seems very interesting. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to cheat a little bit and ask you guys to introduce yourself, right? So if you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Franklin. I'm a lawyer by profession. I've been practicing for the last 12 years. I'm a director and managing partner at CSB Group.
Hi, I'm Colin, Calleja. I'm a director of risk at BDO in Malta. I'm a certified risk professional and I focus primarily on enterprise risk management, business continuity management, and also internal audit.
Hi, I'm Luís. I'm also a lawyer, so I guess this will be a boring panel. Kidding. With the regulation service, providing services to several players in the industry, and in the past, I was a head of legal for a major affiliate in the market.
Okay, so when we were talking, the previous panel is obviously connected to this one, right? We talked about AI and we looked at it from a more holistic view, like AI should be good, but it's not wonderful, it's not perfect. But it links us nicely to the automation discussion, right? How can we automate our processes and make that something that works for the client, for the industry, not as a burden, but something relatively quick? Because I think sometimes when we talk about the KYC check, people imagine that it's going to be lengthy, very difficult to do, friction. But Luís, for example, let's start with you. Can you talk about maybe a bit more about automation? But mostly, I'm interested to help the audience understand that nowadays, you can do a lot of checks, but very quickly and very efficiently.
Yes, that's our topic, because in my opinion, one thing that can differentiate one product from being good or average from a very good one is precisely the automation on the KYC process. The user experience is the most important part. And the first part of this experience is precisely the KYC. So if an operator manages to trigger certain automatic alerts, to easily upload the documents, to just tell the players what they need to do in a very simple way and to be fast, the experience will be better, the product will be better. Plus, there's another thing that we have to consider is there's not enough people out there to do the KYC manually. So if an operator and operators in general keep wanting to do this manually, they will have mistakes because they will have to hire non-qualified people that will have a bigger tendency to they be prone to mistakes. So I'm not saying that machines can replace everything, but we have to use them to our own profit. And in this case, I think it could be game-changing.
So it links me to something, right? I look at you guys' job title. We have a director, tax regulation, director of risk, head of legal. And I'm going to be a bit cheeky here, but often in this industry, the problem is, right, we are creating this regulation. So they are lawyers that work for the government that create regulation. They use legal language, which anyone that opened GDPR would tell you, wow, you know, it's 300 pages long. And in reality, in there is a lot of caveat that says you should be able to use data to protect clients, but the language is legal language, not like normal people language. How much is training important in this industry to help kind of translate the legal term into effective policy when, most importantly, yes, you need to do KYC check, of course, but for the audience, there's also to understand when you don't need to do certain check. How can we help with training? How training and making the language accessible to people, how important is that? Colin?
So you're correct. I mean, unfortunately, regulations have a lot of detail in them. They are written by legal experts. So it's very difficult to understand. But to be fair, regulators do follow up with educational courses to explain better the actual regulations. Now, organizations need to make sure that they do not only understand the regulations, but they actually implement these regulations. And I always say that non-compliance might be costlier than the actual cost of implementing the controls of compliance. So it's important that organizations make sure that the resources that they have actually in place not only understand the regulations, but they essentially can take the required decisions to apply these regulations in practice and don't go overboard, for example, while on the other hand making sure that what is required by the regulator is effectively being implemented. So that is where the balance with achieving the organizational objectives and making sure that the player experience, in this case, in this sector, is really adding value both to the organization and also to the actual players.
I'm going to make the audience work a little here. Guys, let me ask you a question. Did any of you raise your hand if you had a case where you were thinking about expansion, going to a new territory, new regulation, but because you didn't understand the regulation there, it kind of put you off from doing it? Raise your hand if you ever had that situation that you wanted. So I have one hand there for a brave person. Nobody else? Two. Okay. Look, guys, we want to make money, right? We want to expand. I think more of you have that. Franklin, is that something that you see also for you, the training, making regulation accessible to people is important?
Yes. So for me, training is essential, and I'm not talking about that annual AML training that happens. That
the tick the box one,
everyone forgets and everyone doesn't care and everyone is playing on their mobile whilst you're delivering that training. So the training I'm talking about, first of all, it's custom-made training. So know your audience. Are you speaking to directors or are you speaking to juniors or newcomers? So that's number one, because the language must be different. Then I use a lot, when I'm delivering training, I use a lot case studies. Because case studies, usually real case studies, usually remain imprinted in
they
your mind.
resonate in people, right? They can identify.
And just another point which you mentioned, for example, you mentioned the GDPR. Laws need to be changed into something a bit more digestible to your employees. How do you do that? You do that by modifying your policies and procedures. Policies and procedures tend to be overly complex, lengthy as well. So we're already diversifying the law to a policy. Now you need to make it into a handbook as well. So I use the policies and the procedures to deliver training. And one, because no one reads the policies and procedures of a company. Let's face it, let's be honest with ourselves. And two, like that, I'm helping the employees sort of understand what is required and what to look for, like certain red flags, behavioral changes of the player, changes in deposits, for example. These are things which are important to keep in mind, sort of. So yes, for me, training is, I think, the first line of defense, really and truly.
It's one of these, right? For years, you see some other department of the business would try to see compliance as the anti-business department. But in reality, I've been doing this for 20 years now. I always look at it to say, no, I'm trying to be the business enabler. Like you see that room, only two hands raising to say, we try to expand in another market. In my opinion, is because they didn't even consider going elsewhere, thinking, paperwork, let's just make more money where we are. How much of your effort, and this is a new question, we didn't prep that one, so I'm a bit cheeky on the panel here, but how much of your time are you trying to enable business, just to help the audience understand that you're not trying to stop them, right? I know we barely know each other, but I know you're not trying to stop. You're trying to enable business. Do you have any kind of case story in your mind, a little story you can share with the audience on when you're like, I'm trying to make this work?
So that's a very valid point. So another important aspect that comes to mind is implementing the risk-based approach. The risk-based approach, because we cannot put all our clients in the same basket. And this will definitely affect our business. And this is what we need to think about when we look into our business objectives. The boards of directors and also our senior management require constant support to make sure that a risk-based approach is applied across the organization, and the KYC and due diligence procedures are applied to our customers depending on the money laundering risks which might impact our organization. Otherwise, it will be too, first of all, it's too costly for the organization to apply enhanced due diligence for all our players. On the other side, it's frustrating for players because not all players carry the same risk and they don't really require to submit all the documentation and the information that is required for high or extreme risk level players.
So one thing that we have to bear in mind, and I try to do it when advising clients, is lawyers and compliance people, etc. They exist, but they need to understand that clients want to make money. So we should not be there to prevent them from making more money. Obviously, and we have a director of risk here, there is the risk appetite area that needs to be considered. But our focus should be look there and see it as an opportunity and not as a bug. If it's not possible in a certain place, let's look for another place. Secret is being updated with regulation, etc., and have an open mind. Not every client is the same. Clients have different needs. They have different sizes. They have different resources. Taking all that into account and considering that all of them want to make more money, we need to be advising with that in mind.
Yeah, you know, I always find that risk should be part of a expansion strategy from early days, because at some cases you'll be able to come in and say, right, you want to make money in this country. I'm not telling you, no, you can't. I'm just telling you, this is what you need in place in order to enter that business. Meaning that in order to get to your ROI and making money, you need to have a marketing strategy that's going to deliver at least, you know, this number of traffic, that number of business. Then it's viable to enter that region. If you don't have the confidence, don't enter it. I'm not being an anti-business. I'm just telling you that's what you need to achieve and that's what you're going to need in place to enter that area. Does that resonate?
Yes, it does resonate. And I think what was mentioned, the risk-based approach, is very important because AML and onboarding is not really a science. It's not E equals MC squared. You know what I mean? So you have to use a bit your logic. For example, recently we onboarded a client and she's a national of Croatia. Croatia has recently been added on the grey list. And of course, we have an automated process and she was classified as a high-risk customer just because she's a national of Croatia. But then when you dig deeper, you'll realize that she doesn't live there. Her economic activities are not in Croatia. So over there, it's an example where you have to apply logic, and automated systems are sometimes not enough. It's not a checklist, and that's why a risk-based approach is essential.
It goes back to training, right? Because, but every system has layers. And once you understand the regulation and you understand that you are allowed to a layer, in this case, yes, she's Croatian, but she's domiciliated in another country. So legally speaking, if a financial income are domiciliated as elsewhere, that's how you look at her. And that's only come when the team understand these finance nuances within the regulation, what they're allowed to do, and therefore tune the system to act accordingly and to treat her as this is where your financial statements are, this is where you are legally bound to. Your nationality doesn't really matter in that respect, right? And so this is, again, like training, understand the issue and how you can make better business out of it. And I go back to this stage, like I find in my previous experiences, often the business side is the making plan and only involving risk at the end, thinking, oh, we don't want these guys involved. But actually, the sooner you talk to the team to say, this is how you can enter that territory, this is how you can enter this new business area, the sooner you can have a plan that is going to actually, from the beginning, take all these detail incorporated into the business plan and make it more effective. Is that something that you've seen, Colin? Something that you see of early engagement with the risk team being effective?
Yeah. This goes exactly to what we were saying previously, and even what Franklin has just mentioned. So it's a question of having resources that can think and balance out between the business opportunities and the regulatory requirements. So we don't want to go overboard, but on the other side, we are required, being regulated entities, to be compliant with the relevant legislation. So we need to have the resources educated and trained. We need to have resources that understand, and boards need to be supported by professionals in the sector who know exactly what is required and how these can be adapted to your business model. I agree with you that this kind of analysis and risk assessment needs to be conducted at early stages, but it's not a one-time assessment because our external environment is changing constantly and we need to adapt ourselves to this external environment. I always say no business works in isolation. We do work in a business environment, and these push factors to which we need to adapt constantly.
Luís, I see you agreeing with all that. Anything you want to add to it, or you really like Colin nailed it on the head?
It's I like to think of clients and I like them to think of us as part of their team. And especially when we are dealing with anti-fraud and risk assessments, I think that's the key for good decisions. Because if we are not aligned, or if our risk appetite is different than the one from the clients, we will not be performing. I think that's the most important thing to have in mind and to create a relationship with clients is this.
You know, you mentioned something here that is interesting to me. We still often mention fraud as a separate entity than AML. When in reality, in 2017 now, when the FIFA AML directive came out, fraud is an AML issue. And mostly in the gambling industry, I mean, you know, in the end, by performing fraud on a gambling platform, creating a fake user, a fake account, and all the techniques that the fraudster are using, I can use that to laundering money. And so we should not take them as separated. I always think, like, when I see the fraud team being separated or not communicating often with the AML and risk team, he always like tell me this is a bad sign. So as a last point before we close this panel, how much do you think fraud and an AML team should be working much more together? Do you see this silo being an issue? And if I can have a few last words on you on that topic.
Yes, I mean, definitely, I agree with you. They should be combined in actual fact, because certain red flags that the fraud team might identify are very much similar to an AML red flag, and there must be communication. As Owen was saying before this panel, he was saying that fraud is a predicate offense, similar to tax evasion, and these are the sort of at the onset where these red flags need to be find out and educate your team about them.
Colin, any word on that?
No, I would look at it from a different perspective. So an essential function in an organization is the internal audit function. Okay, so what is the main scope of an internal audit function? The main scope is that tests and reviews are conducted on the controls that the organization has in place to give assurance to the board of directors on their effectiveness. So this also ties in fraud and AML. So it's in the main interest of the board of directors and also senior management to make sure that the controls that they have actually in place are being tested by independent individuals within the organization, and where any gaps are identified, these gaps can be addressed such that the fraud controls and the AML controls are implemented effectively across the organization.
Yeah, because external eyes or fresh eyes on the process, assume your people try to do their best.
Fresh and independent.
Yes, fresh and independent means that if you assume your team did their best, they intended to do their best, it's hard for them to be the judge of their own work. If I was judging my own homework when I was at school, I would have been a great student. Luís, any point on that?
Just say that I totally agree with what Franklin said, that these areas need to work combined, and that can also save us time, because if we detect the fraud, there's no point in doing the other KYCs and everything with that player.
Yeah, so, exactly like we said on the other panel, right? Yeah. It's risk-based approach. Don't pay for a check you don't need to know
Exactly.
because the fraud indicator would tell you that device or that IP address. These guys are already identified. Don't waste money to do a KYC check. Just ban them from your platform and move on. Right? That's the end of our panel. Bang on time. I hope it was good for you guys in the audience. Please, thank you to my panelists. Don't hesitate to talk to them after. Grab them for a beer and ask them some questions. Nice free advice. Do it. Do it. Thank you.